I am going to pray, and then we're going to discuss a little bit. We'll discuss Romans 1 just a little bit. We'll spend most of our time discussing that brief, but really, I think, fabulous video by Ravi, Zacharias. Let's pray. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for each of these students. It is such a joy to see their faces, to hear their voices. Father, I pray that all that we discuss, all that we consider today during this time will be honoring to you and glorifying to you. I pray it in Jesus' name. So first of all, with regard to Romans 1, and you read it, you answered some questions on it, and then you watched a lecture that I did about it. What are your thoughts on Romans 1, just in general? Good thoughts.
I thought it was kind of interesting from where like the beginning of Romans was more about like the righteous and what God thinks of the righteous, and then like the next part was the unrighteous. And it's just kind of like difficult to read the wrath of God and like for the unrighteous. Like I don't know if it was just me, but like when I was reading it, it was just like very raw.
Yeah, it is. In fact, to prepare for this today, I looked back at the study I wrote on Romans, which is what your questions were based on, but I wanted to see what the lecture said and all that. And in the study, I said, this is hard to read, and it kind of makes me queasy when I read it. So yeah, it is raw, very raw. Michael, what were you going to say?
It has this like list of like all these bad things that people do. Like I'm trying to find where it was, but like I'm reading through it, I'm like, okay. And like it keeps naming off more, and then you realize just how many of them you're guilty of, and it's like, wow. Like you think you're a decent person, but you're not.
I mean, we tend to think that Romans 1 is just about homosexuality, right? And it's certainly not. It's about the righteous shall live by faith, which was Martin Luther's kind of aha verse that caused everything that happened with Martin Luther and the Reformation and all that to creation, and that God's existence is obvious to sinfulness and homosexuality. But homosexuality is just one among a number of sins, as we've already noticed, that are listed. Any other thoughts? So Paul connects sexual sin with idolatry, and I noticed that some of you kind of either weren't sure what the connection is between sexual sin and idolatry. So what do you think the connection is?
I thought it was that you're taking something like that you're meant to do, whether it be worshiping God or going with a specific type of person, and you're twisting it into either an idol or the type of person you're not supposed to go with. I don't really know how to explain my thought process there, but you're perversing what God intended.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I thought too. Just like you were meant for heterosexual relationships, but some people will replace them with homosexual. And as for God, we might replace it with other idols like social media or some other religion. So that's what I got. It's pretty much the same thing.
You can put sort of any relationship that you have in a position of idolatry, but when it comes to sexual sin, it's very direct, because it's very much clear that this is not what you're supposed to be doing until this point in time. And it's deliberate and obvious disobedience to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, a part of the context I didn't give you, and that's my bad. But I think we might have talked about this in years past. That in the ancient world, and particularly in the pagan ancient world, sexuality was all tied up with worship. In the pagan world, in the idol worshiping world, sexual acts were part of the worship. They were one and the same. So there was already in the ancient world this connection between sexuality and sexual acts and worship. And I think Paul is trading on that a little bit. But I also believe that we are particularly prone as human beings to sexual sin. And it has a particularly strong hold on people, and a power to cause us to trade all that is good and holy, faithfulness to God and faithfulness in marriage, for that thing, for that sin. I think in some ways more than other sins do. So you can sin without committing idolatry, but I think sexual sin just has this perniciousness to it that it can consume us in a way that maybe, I don't know, gossip doesn't. So in that sense, it's idolatry. Any other questions on that? Okay, well, I want to start talking about the Ravi Zacharias. Boy, pound for pound, minute for minute, he said a lot of truth in those 11 minutes, didn't he? And so I want to start with any thoughts you have after watching that video. And Jonah, Joel, and Lily, I can't see you, so if you want to say something or start talking, unmute yourself first, and or you can raise your hand raise thing and call on you. So any thoughts about Ravi, other than he's brilliant?
I was about to say, that video is fantastic.
Yeah, I really like the way he explained it, because for me personally, when I look at something, I can look at it and know that it's wrong, but I can't figure out how to articulate exactly how it's wrong.
Mhm.
So he explained it in a way that was really helpful to me. And especially that first point about how they're trying to live using two different worldviews, but you can't do that. You have to choose one and stick with it.
Mhm.
And so do Christians sometimes do that, right? As well. It goes both
Yeah.
ways.
I noticed that he spent much more time talking about the first point than he did the other two. And I think that's because the other two are actually very much intertwined. The relational section and the spiritual section are very, very connected in a way.
I agree. It's good observation. Any other just upfront thoughts? So Ravi talked about 3 panels, by which I think he meant 3 ideas, kind of like if you have a 3-paneled, I hate to bring back bad memories of the science fair, but you understand what I'm saying. You've got these 3 panels, these 3 different portions or parts of it. So 3 ideas surrounding the topic of homosexuality. Not today, probably, but at some point we're going to talk about the difference between homosexuality or same-sex attraction and homosexual behavior. I want to get into that at some point, but the topic of homosexuality with the logical or sociological issues, the theological problem, and the relational problem. So we're going to walk through each one. I'm going to quote Ravi a little bit and ask you questions based on that. So Ravi defined 3 different social systems: the anonymous social system, the heteronymous social system, autonomous social system. So a theonomous social system is based on what? Who makes the rules? In other words,
God.
God, theo, God. In a heteronymous system, who makes the rules?
Pretty much anybody else. Was it like the higher up people, like the richer people, or
Right.
like the
Like
president
the
or
lawmakers
something?
of the land, I think.
So those in power, the few
Mhm.
govern the masses, right? And it isn't really like a government. It has to be more autocratic than that. So a heteronymous, and hetero means other,
Mhm.
or another. So someone other than the people are making decisions for the people. So think Nazi Germany, think Sharia law, that sort of thing, where the few are dictating how people can and can't behave. That's different than laws. Um, because there's no voting people in, no democracy or Republican type of government. So heteronymous means that those few that know what's right rule everybody else. And then the third one was autonomous. What's autonomous?
Self-governed or
Like
self-ruled, whatever. word you put on that.
those decisions you can make for yourself,
Right.
the different versions of right and wrong you can come up with for yourself.
You get to decide for yourself what's right or wrong. And then he asked her, do we live, what kind of, or it might have been him, what kind of social system, not political system, social system we have. And he or she said, autonomous, right? We decide. I get to decide what I think is right. And you don't have to agree with that, because you get to decide in our culture what is right. And if we act on that, so long as it's within law, right? Well, I think murder is fine, so I'm going to kill you. No, I can't do that, right? But within the law, like if I want to paint, I saw a house that was the ugliest shade of green you can ever, like highlighter green. And it was like, okay, well, you can't stop someone from painting their house highlighter green or purple or whatever else it is. And so I'm sorry if you have a highlighter green house. I'm sorry about that. Because there's no law against that, right? You get to decide what you think is a pretty color for your house. But that's not a theological issue. That's not a morals issue, obviously. But that's what autonomy is. So in his conversation with that reporter, Ravi said, are you going to give me the privilege of my autonomy too? Or as soon as you disagree with my answer, will you switch to heteronymous mode and dictate for me what I believe? Now, have you seen that kind of situation in our culture? And where have you seen it?
A lot of the kind of common thing nowadays is the people who will get very offended by things and respond with you can't tell me that, you can't say that to me. Like when they say they can't, when you say you can't, they mean it literally. They will not allow you to do that, and that's not fair. Even if what you're saying to them, if you're saying it in a mean way, they're free to get mad at you for it, but telling you that you can't say that to them is not right. And that's becoming more and more common with, internet, social media, and just people in general.
And it's kind of coupled with this idea of you shouldn't say that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Or you shouldn't believe that.
that's what they're implying. Yes, is that you shouldn't, like you are wrong in and of yourself for thinking or saying that.
And that's then heteronymous mode, right? Yeah, Michael.
He didn't quite mention it, but it's also an issue in the church, with different theologies and even within the same theology of, you can't think that way. Like, let's take the homosexuality topic. There's some people who think that it's okay. There's some people who think that it's not, and people will treat other people differently depending on what they think.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And it goes both ways, right? It goes, that was not meant to be a play on words. It, uh, it goes, Christians do this to people who are gay, and whether they're Christian or not, and gay people do the same thing Christians.
Mhm.
I'm thinking of Westboro Baptist Church, and I saw them up close and personal
Church.
years ago. I think you remember my telling you that. And I've never seen such hatred. And they're saying you can't believe differently than we do. You can't have a different opinion of any number of things, but primarily sexuality than we do. And again, heteronomous, not autonomous. We live in an autonomous culture. So, how do we live in a way that honors Christ with regard to people who disagree with us in an autonomous culture?
We just love people.
Love
Like-
without judgment.
Hmm.
What did you say, Ethan?
Love without judgment.
Love without judgment? What else? Somebody else said something.
Oh, I said just
Uh,
love them.
Is that you, Krista?
Yeah, I
Is it
was just pretty much the same thing, that it's really easy for us to judge others, but it doesn't really give us a very good example of God's love when we're judging them, when we should really be loving them, because judgment isn't our job, it's God's job.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? I'm going to give you kind of two sides to this coin. I want to try and give you some, and we'll talk probably about this again, but I want to give you some compassion for a certain group of people. And then I want to give you some insight into another group of people. So I want you to consider the same-sex attracted Christian who believes that to act on that would be sin. Think about what life must be like to know that there's no option for you to live in a relationship or marriage that is God honoring. That'd be really hard, wouldn't it? And so I believe the church should have great compassion for those who are same-sex attracted. In other words, they are attracted to the other sex. They understand that that's what I call it is a disordered love. I don't call that sin. And the reason I don't call it sin is the Bible says that Jesus was tempted in every way that we are, yet was without sin. So it would seem to me, and I could be wrong on this, but it would seem to me that the temptation is not sin. The action is. And so consider how hard it would be to know that the rest of your life you couldn't have a loving monogamous relationship. Unless God, and he can, unless God changes your orientation, you're going to hear from a man, Greg Wallace, that happened to. You're going to hear from a man, Ty Wiss, that did not happen to. But he's married anyway to a woman. It's a really interesting story. After a little Ty Wiss video. So yeah, I think the church has fallen down in being. My internet may die, so I may have to move to the computer lab. I have a little more. I kept the door, but I have a little more privacy in this room. So, yeah, I just believe the church should have more compassion for those people and reach out to those people and connect and care for those people. Now, here's the other side of it, and I think I've told you all this before, but I have a nephew. His name goes by William. We call him Willie. Is gay, openly gay, has been, golly, since shortly after he graduated, probably probably 9 years, 8, 9, 10 years, shortly after he graduated from college. Well, no, that wouldn't be that long. It'd be more like 6 or 7 years. And he's married to Robert. And to them, particularly to Willie, Robert is as clear as he can be. But to Willie, I can't be loving unless I'm affirming of homosexuality. Like, I can say that I love him. I can say I'm not homophobic. I can say that I accept him. But unless I say that Willie and Robert's marriage is the same in God's sight as my marriage with Jeff, I can't express love. At least that's where Willie is today. So I want you to understand, and I want you to realize that you may think you're expressing love, you may think you're expressing acceptance, but there may be people who refuse that or refuse to believe that, because in their mind, in their worldview, those two things can't. You can't be unaffirming. You can't be, what's the word they use? It's not very complimentary word, and it's slipping my mind right now.
Intolerant?
No, it's the theological term for it. I'll probably, you can't be not affirming and be accepting of that person. So I just want you to be. I'm not asking you to think or feel or have an opinion about it. Just be aware of it. Just be aware of it. And I've worked hard to try and grow my relationship with Willie and connect. Like, we both love classic contemporary Christian music, and he wrote an entire. He's brilliant, by the way, and he wrote an entire thesis on the WOW series of I don't know if you even know that, but ask your parents. They remember the WOW series like it was the best of for a certain year in Christian music. And he wrote this whole thesis, and we sat for hours talking about what he had learned and what he had written, and it was a beautiful time. I mean, we really had a great time talking about that. But yeah, I don't know that we'll ever have a full relationship unless one or the other of us changes our mind. I don't think that's so the second question was the theological problem. And in the theological problem, the reporter said to him, "Why do Christians denounce racism but do not accept homosexual behavior?" And what that person was implying is they're both discrimination. Like, to be racist is discrimination, and to not accept homosexual behavior is discrimination. What was Ravi's answer to that?
We value race and ethnicity as something that is sacred, and because we honor the marriage bed as sacred as well, it's the same thing.
Yeah, both are sacred. There's in both there is something sacred. So yeah, race and ethnicity are sacred. It's a sacred gift. Our ethnicity is a sacred gift. Every tribe, every tongue, every nation will worship before the throne. Don't know why we don't worship together now, because we're going to be worshiping. We'll all be sitting at the same banquet table, and that is God delights in that, right? And so it is a sacred gift. Sexuality is also sacred. It's meant for marriage between a man and a woman. That's what we're taught. That's what Jesus taught. and for at least two reasons. One is to reflect God's image. The marriage is to reflect God's image and to reflect our relationship with Christ. We're called the bride of Christ as the church, and to procreate. So two purposes in that sacred relationship. I really loved what I'm gonna quote Ravi at length here because I really love what he had to say. He said this. Marriage is the most sacred relationship into which you will ever enter, because love is given one word in English, but there are four words in the Greek. Agape, which is unconditional love, that's God's love for us. So you're going to love someone no matter what happens. It's unconditional. There's no, I'll love you as long as you do this for me. That's putting a condition on your love. And so then that's not unconditional. Phileo, which is friendship or brotherly love. Storge, which is protective parental love. But I'll tell you what, don't get between a bear or a mama bear and her cub, because yeah, she'll kill you, and most mothers will, not just bears. So yeah, be careful. All mothers are mama bears. We all are very protective. And then eros, which is physical or sexual love. And then he says marriage is the only relationship that pulls all four of these together. If you pull out agape, which you do, I'm saying this now, you do with any sex outside of marriage, whether hetero or homosexual, you lose eros. What does he mean by that?
Because doing it outside of the confines that God has set up is going against God's purpose for it, and therefore it's not God honoring.
Good. The reason you lose eros is that you have put conditions on that type of love, and now it's no longer unconditional. And only in marriage are all four of those done, if marriage is done right, if it's a godly marriage. Only that is unconditional love. Love without condition. I will love you. So yeah, if you pull agape out of any of those, they can be misused. The agape is what holds each of those together. Without agape, it just becomes getting what you want from someone else, or using someone else for your own pleasure. And then he also said this: in that sacredness and the beauty of the consummate relationship between a man and a woman, as it is shown in the singular commitment between the man and the woman in the marital vow, I do and I will. When you say I do to the one, you say I don't to all of the others. When you say I will to the one, you say I won't to all of the others. So any departure from that beauty and sacredness of the full confluences of love is a biblical notion of what it really means to be married. And to just take one behavior, and in this case he's referring to homosexuality, and make it look like it's aberrant is not right. All departures from that are not acceptable in the sight of God. In other words, homosexual sexual behavior is not the only aberrant sexual behavior. Anything outside of marriage is aberrant, just as aberrant. It's not right, particularly for the Christian community, to take this one sin and set it apart and say, this is the one that's bad, and then just overlook all kinds of other things that are going on within the church without people getting upset and picking on people for that. It's not right to just say this is what's bad when there's a whole host of what is not honoring to God, what is not acceptable to God that's going on. And we shoot.
What?
Oh, wow, Abby
She's
has
back.
the power.
She's
Hey
back.
guys, I'm in charge now. Let's go.
Sorry. You are the host now, it says. Who was the host while I was gone?
That was
Abby.
me.
Abby.
That was me.
Did it make you the host?
Yeah,
We
I
didn't know
did.
until just
How
now.
does it choose that?
I don't
Not
know.
even
Usually the first to join.
Should be
I
Carissa. She's my
was the first to join.
Yeah,
It's probably alphabetical because her name is AB.
Oh, that's true. That's true. It
Oh,
just
really?
picked the host. I have no idea when that happened. For a minute, I was afraid I was kicked off for too much time, but it hasn't ever done that before. So we were talking about all departures are not acceptable in the sight of God, and so we can't just pick one and say this is the one that's unacceptable because all of them are. Heterosexual sex is just as aberrant in terms of being a sacrilege outside of, in other words, sacrilege means outside of that which is sacred, as homosexual sex, heterosexual sex outside of marriage. Cute.
She's back.
She's on the move.
I'm here.
She's on her way.
I'm moving into the computer lab. Maybe that's the problem. But it may just be, boy, the sound changes when I walk in here. It may just be that I don't know what's happening. Maybe something else, but hopefully this will keep
Oh, what's Carissa drinking?
us together.
Smoothie.
Ooh.
I need
Okay,
some
let's
smoothie
move on
recipes.
to the third panel then. The relational problem. So the Bible calls us to love. And Ravi says our responsibility and privilege is to love everyone, no matter what. So how do we live that out?
How do
Within
we live out
reason, not
what part of that? What?
How do we live that out? Loving everyone, no matter what. Specifically in this context.
within
Remind-
reason, not treating them differently. To a certain extent, obviously, there's a point where you have to, but up to that point, treating them just like you would anybody else. Which is, I think that's very closely connected to not judging them.
Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like you were saying earlier, judgment is a big part of it. Because like as long as you're not being judgmental, people probably won't notice that you even believe any different.
See, here's a thing that I thought about when we were talking about this earlier, is that it's a lot easier not to judge somebody when you love them. Because if you think about the bad things that the people that you love do, seem much less bad than the things that people you don't know do. So you're more willing to accept that from them because you love them. And like people will cover up murder for people that they love, you know, and condemn people that they don't know for doing it. So I feel like love helps you not to judge.
Yeah. I think we have to be careful
You should have like a beer.
about the way we talk or the way
It's like a fill of water.
we
It'll mix them.
tease or phrase things. I'm gonna tell you a story. I'm not gonna tell you the whole story because part of it has to do with something that happened at school. So I don't want to tell you that. But I was at Thanksgiving a few years ago, and Willie was in the circle, Josh was in the circle, and my nephew-in-law Tim was in the circle. and we were talking, and I was relating something that had happened at school, and what I said at the time, and what I related, and what I wasn't thinking. I realized too late that I wasn't thinking. And what I had said to someone was, well, at least he's not gay. And I saw the look on Willie's face and my heart broke. And I said that I will go to my grave regretting that moment. And I remember when Willie was leaving and I was hugging him, and I said, I was sorry again for like the 5th time. And he said, AA, which is what they call me. AA, I love you. I forgive you. And I said, really? I'm not just sorry that it in front of you. I'm sorry that I said it in the first place. Like I shouldn't have even said it in the first place. And I think part of how we love is not using homosexuality as a battering ram, as a joke, as a put down. Does that make sense? Because that's hurtful to those, whether they're Christians or not, whether they're affirming or not. That's hurtful, particularly to those who are same-sex attracted. We need to, I think part of how we communicate love, part of how we love those who are same-sex attracted, is by not making it a joke, right? Anything else you can think of?
Think of as far as what?
How we can love them, how we can accept them.
I'm gonna wait till you get onto a different topic to talk about that, but I don't have anything for this.
That's what I'm doing too.
Are there other things that we're gonna go over here?
Well, one thing that I get confused about is like, where do you draw the line between loving them and caring for them and this is too far for me to go? Like, if somebody were to do something that would technically be enabling them but would also be keeping them safe in what they're doing, which would it be better to not do the thing or to help them? That's the thing that I'm confused about.
I don't think you'd be loving them by enabling them. If you love them, you wouldn't enable them. So that's not exactly loving them. That's something else. But yeah, it is a bit of a tough
Because
you
in
can get
that
stuck
same
there.
situation, you're loving them, but you're also not. So
I'm not confident, and I can't say this, I could be completely wrong about this, but I'm not confident it's our job to enable or not enable them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
job's to
yes,
love them.
we could treat them in a way that is affirming to that, and that's probably not okay, but I feel like there should be a way that we can treat them the same, love them, show them the love of God, the love of Christ, without doing that. To an extent, of course, there gets to a point where, like Miss Hughes said with her nephew, there gets to a point where the relationship, hits a bit of a wall there. But I feel like up to that point, there is or has to be a way to do this without enabling or not enabling. Just, I don't know, keeping that separate, I suppose, if that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think a good part of that is not getting into arguments with them. And I think that's what happens a lot of times. Like you're trying to change their mind. And, early on we did that. I did that with Willie. And now I realize that it's not productive. And I need to pray for him instead of trying to convince him of something.
I feel oftentimes, at least in my experience, that, and not just like people who believe in homosexual behavior, but just people in general just want to challenge Christians when it comes to their what they believe and why. So I feel like sometimes there's people just out to with a bone to pick with Christians, and it's really tough to actually talk about it or love them when they don't really care about listening.
Right.
Well, there's two things there. One, I think, and this is a bit of an assumption that again could be wrong. People that are trying to pick a fight with Christians or anybody, but I guess I suppose this kind of pick a fight with Christians about homosexuality or really any issue, are doing it maybe because they've had a poor experience with a Christian in the past.
Yeah.
Right. So you're right when you say it is hard to argue with them about that because, yeah, if they're not going to, if they don't want to hear you talk because the last time they talked to a Christian about it, the Christian just got mad or whatever. Yeah, it's hard to do that. But, I mean, I feel like unless they specifically bring it up, I'm just not going to talk to, I mean, within reason. I mean, if it's obviously there's some situation where it's necessary that I need to bring it up to them. Otherwise, because there's too high of a risk of an argument starting and then, like Ms. Hughes said, you're not going to be able to change their minds, chances are. I mean, no matter how good your argument is or how bad theirs is, it's just going to end up with two people or at least one person probably ticked off, which is counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how sometimes people put a group of people in a box?
Yeah.
Say they're all like this. Well, Christians sometimes do that with homosexuals, right? They're all in this box and they're all like this.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes non-Christian community does that with Christians, right? And they put us in a box and you're all like this. And it's not fair, but it happens. And you've got to, and Ty Wiss will talk about this a lot. And he has the street cred to talk about it. But we need to show them that we're different, and that we're not going to say hateful things or get angry at them or put them down or anything like that. So one last thing, and then I have the sense that you have something you want to bring up. If you're okay, if you have to leave, we've gone over 30 minutes, so and school just ended. It's 17 now, so.
I gotta get dressed for track.
I'll stay as long as you want to stay. Ravi said, God gives us the prerogative of choice, but not the privilege of determining a different outcome to what the choice will entail. The consequences are bound to the choice. What do you think he means by that?
I feel like it kind of speaks for itself. We have the ability to choose, but those choices can lead to different consequences, and we can't run away from that.
And just because you think you're making a great decision doesn't make it a great decision. You don't get to choose whether or not it's good. You just get to choose whether or not to make it.
And sometimes
You choose.
Go ahead.
You choose the choice, and the consequences come with the choice. So, as long as you're aware of things going on around you, you're probably aware of the consequences of your actions. So technically, you're also choosing the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Very good point. Do you think of any examples of that? Doesn't have to be on this topic, just the
Well,
good.
This is random, as it probably would be anyway. But like if you were given a gun, or you probably shouldn't be given a gun. If you bought a gun,
I shouldn't be.
and you didn't like do any training to learn how to take care of it properly or how to use it properly, you might end up doing something that you don't want to do. Like you might accidentally shoot yourself in the foot. Like one of the main laws of using a gun is don't point it at anything you're not willing to shoot, even if it's unloaded. And if you aren't going to be careful about those things, then you could end up shooting something that you don't want to shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can think of any number of examples that fit that, right? Cool and practical. Okay. Mitch, what did you want to bring up?
Mitch.
I wasn't sure what time it would be useful to bring this up, but I feel like people need to stop identifying with their opinions. Like it doesn't identify you to have that opinion. And even with like the sin itself. So here's what I don't get is you can love somebody who lies, you can love somebody who cheats, you can love somebody who steals A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But why is it different that they're sinning in like a homosexual way? And even let's say it's because it's defiling marriage. Even so, there's things like premarital sex or adultery or unfaithfulness, and they're not met with nearly the same kind of pushback from the Christian community as homosexuality is. And it's kind of weird that as Christians, we've deemed homosexuality to be worse than other things when it's not worse than other sins, if that makes any sense.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. And it isn't any worse. And I think Christians by and large would say it isn't any worse, but their actions and their attitudes say differently sometimes. Oh, Christina's wanting to come. There we go. Better late than never.
All right, now we need Ezra.
Hi, Christina. Welcome. Maybe she's. We're happy to have you here. So it isn't worse, but I think sometimes Christians, even though they say that's not what they believe, or they would agree with you, that's their behavior says otherwise. And I think that has something to do with this sense of, marriage has always within the church, marriage has always been honored, right? So that's a good thing. And then heterosexuality outside of marriage has always been bad, but also always and increasingly, and becoming more and more accepted, and it's kind of swept under the rug. It's kind of like, we know this is going on, but we're going to act like it's not, or we're just going to close our eyes and stop up our ears and la 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 la, I'm not listening. But so people knew it was there, but I think some people think, well, at least that's how God intended it, a man and a woman. Homosexuality has traditionally always been something that, in Ravi Zacharias' words, is aberrant, and Christians haven't seen other sex outside of marriage, heterosexual sex outside of marriage, as being aberrant, but in the sense that it's sacrilege, it is just as aberrant. And I think that's part of why, unfairly, homosexual behavior has gotten a worse rap than other sins, other sexual sins. And it's not fair. It's not right. Any other questions or anything else you want to talk about? Anyone want to add to that?
Not necessarily adding to that, but just like something I think. I don't know if this has already been, my Wi-Fi, well, actually my electricity got knocked out for a second because people don't understand how outlets work upstairs, and it affects me down here. But so I knocked out my Wi-Fi for a little bit, so I don't know if this was already talked about. But with loving and truth, and needing both of those things, truth and love at the same time, for me, if I love somebody who is in a homosexual sin or something like that, then I want them to be happy. I want the best for them. I would love for them to be able to have a relationship that is approved of and godly, I guess, in my opinion, because I know not everybody agrees that it's wrong, but in my opinion, I think it is too. But loving them also is knowing that they can't get that same happiness when they're living in sin. So while I love them, I tend to make a point that I can't condone it, but I don't make it a big part of the relationship. So like if they were to come to me for relationship advice within that homosexual relationship, then I would have to be like, I'm sorry, I don't condone that. I don't think it's a great thing. So I don't know if I can support it by giving you advice on how to help it. But then regardless of that, I tend to interact as usual.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about teenagers. I can't imagine Willie asking me for any sort of marital advice. I doubt that he would come to me. So I'm not sure that you'd probably be put in that position, but possibly. Any other thoughts, questions, things to discuss?
How you doing, Miss Keyser?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I was pretty stressed out there for a while, but kind of settled into more of a pattern, and some work days are 9 and 10 hours long, and some are 7 and 8 hours long. So that's a lot more up my alley than the 13-hour days I was.
You got any information for us that you could tell us, like that we could know that other people don't know?
That was well worded.
Well, I know my son was in on a situation yesterday where 2 people were found dead in a house and 1 was found dead outside. Is that what
Who
you
did
meant?
he kill?
Situation like that?
Oh my
Lane?
God, I thought you meant Lane.
No,
Lane
no,
killed
no,
I was
someone?
like, Jesus,
No.
Oh, I was like,
Two
Lane killed
sons.
someone.
Two sons.
Lane killed
I got it.
The
someone.
deputy
Two
sheriff
sons.
in the family. The deputy
See,
sheriff.
she knew what I was. She knew what I was asking about, but she told us
Heart
something
attack.
else.
I'm like, I'm Snapchatting him right now. He better not be like dealing
What
with dead
kind
bodies.
of inside information do you want?
Inside school information, you know, like.
What has Mr. Hood tried to expel anybody lately, or is that just when he's talking to me, beating me up, trying to expel me?
To my knowledge, he has not expelled anyone. At least not that he's.
I'm on my way.
You want to get expelled right before you
Notice
graduate?
the joke is he's been trying to get me expelled since 7th grade.
Oh, well.
Like the 3rd week of 7th grade, I was in his office in trouble. So
But some might
since
argue
then-
that you were trying to get yourself expelled since 7th
That's
grade.
actually fair, yeah. Ms. Keyser, I have something very important that you're gonna want to hear.
Okay.
So I
You're
said,
pregnant?
I'm
Are
pregnant.
you pregnant?
Congrats.
I'm pregnant. No, I was Snapchatting Lane just a few minutes ago, and I sent a picture of the screen of this screen to him with the caption "best class/teacher ever,"
Oh my God.
and his response was, "No, she's not." I'm like, Lane, you can't say it about your own mother.
I was his teacher for 7 years before I was his teacher again for 2 years. So I've taught him for nearly half of his life. Secondly,
He doesn't
I've got a sticky note on my computer that says "Mom equals best teacher." So
He's a liar.
in his handwriting, and Josh
He's a
certainly
suck-up.
wouldn't say that about me. So
I can't believe you sold him out like that, Ethan. Come
Oh,
on.
the first thing he said, he sent that, and then he sent one immediately after. He said, "Don't tell my mom that." And I'm like, you have asked for it. You walked.
You're a
into this
terrible
room right
roommate
here.
already.
tell him he's not getting dinner tonight.
I'm telling him that right now.
It's going to be good, so he may want dinner. What kind of inside information do you know when your last day is?
That would be nice.
Or 11th, I thought.
I
May
thought it was the 8th.
May 8th.
8th. Wait, that's like
Oh.
not that far
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. That's
how does that work?
That's why I sent out the text or the email saying, please get your work in, because I don't want to be grading a pile of stuff when in the last 2 days before grades are
How
due.
about the graduation ceremony? Can we do that in Minecraft or
I
like?
have no inside information on that.
Hood has said, and I sent this message to the group chat. It was a message from Hood. He said he is going to try to get an in-person ceremony organized. It may be in like November, for all he knows. He is trying his hardest to get that set up for a time that we can all actually go to it. He said to me later, it may just be the students and Mr. Hood and Mr. Strong and a couple teachers, and that might be it. And it's gonna have to be like live streamed or recorded.
Yeah,
But
I
he's
talked-
gonna try his hardest to get something done.
Well, if it's a couple teachers, I better be one of them.
Yes,
I-
you have
I-
taught.
I
You've
would-
taught a
I
good
would-
chunk of us since 8th grade. So
I would advocate that I have taught a lot of you for 5 straight years. I think I've earned my stripes.
I also talked to him, and he said that he would try to do something for that senior prayer chapel.
All
He did
right.
say that.
I
He did say
forgot
that.
about that. I've kind of accepted it this way. I'm ready to just be done.
Miss Keiser, what are they doing for finals? Are we taking them? Are we just
Shut up.
just not doing them?
Shut up.
Yeah.
It is a good
Um,
question.
I think we will have finals.
Ah!
I think it's the same as it always has been. Have an A class, you're exempt from the final, except for in my class. I will still do what I do in the final. It's not difficult. And if you do it, you're guaranteed an A. So you'll get more information on it.
It's gonna be which one of her kids is her favorite.
Currently,
No.
That's the whole question. It's the whole test. Just one question.
Don't listen to Lane on that. I don't have a favorite child.
She says, thinking
all-
Josh furiously in her
All
head.
3 of my children think I have a favorite child, but none of my children. Well, that's not true. Only
I mean,
one
my
of
mom's favorite is
children
pretty
actually
obvious.
A parent, and none of
It's
them
not
have been a
me.
mom. So-
do they agree on who the favorite is?
Oh yeah. Yeah. All 3 of
It's
them
Katie.
think Katie is the favorite.
Lane says that it's fine that he's not getting dinner. He knows how to cook, and I don't believe that he knows.
He knows how to make scrambled eggs, and I taught him how to do that.
That's a worthwhile skill.
That's it.
Me
That's all he
too.
does.
I can read the instructions on the box. Okay, Miss Keiser, that alternate thing that's due like the last day of school. What, like, are we journaling every day? Like, I feel like we're already talking about it in the assignments, so I'm just repeating myself if I'm just writing down what I already said.
Well, and yeah, in some sense you're repeating it, but some of the things, we're gonna have this format much more often than anything else. Like you're gonna have fewer things that you actually write and turn in. You're gonna be watching videos and we're gonna be discussing them. And so it's
That's nice.
processing that and writing. If you want to journal daily about it, feel free to journal daily about it. But I'm thinking, 2 or 3 times a week, like kind of like when we do something like Ravi Zacharias is, journal your thoughts on that. When we do, you'll definitely all want to journal after Taoist. And you'll watch Greg Wallace tomorrow maybe. So yeah, after we do something, just journal about it.
What do you want us to journal about that we didn't write in the assignment? Because, like, it says, have you any extra thoughts you have? What's your opinion? And you write all that stuff down. So then, what are we supposed to journal about? Because we just wrote down everything we thought.
You can write something similar in your journal.
Oh, okay.
But my goal is for you to process your where you stand, what you believe, and sometimes that is a process, is a gradual coming into being. And so, kind of what I'm wanting you to do is to journal so that you can go back and say, oh, when we started out, I felt like this was really important. This was where I stood, but seeing that I've realized something I hadn't thought about before, or I hadn't considered before. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, there's not any one particular way to do it. And as long as, I mean, I'm not going to read it word for word because I want you and I want to protect your own privacy. So I will look at it to make sure that that you didn't just write hickory dickory dock the clock, and make sure that you did the assignment. But if you did the assignment, you'll get the points for it. And this is a process I want you to go through. It's not a process that I particularly want to be specific in grading. I don't know if that is, but and the same will be true actually for your final. I won't read it at all unless you ask me to. I won't even see it. Well, I'll see it, I guess, but I won't read it unless if you turn it in, you'll get a 95% if you turn it. If you do the second part I'm going to ask you to do, you'll get a 100. But that will all make sense. Any other questions? I really don't have a lot of inside information. And each teacher is going to figure out, I mean, there are going to be finals. Each teacher is going to those finals look like.
Couldn't just change the requirements
and they
is
won't
what we're
be
doing instead.
They won't be I don't think that they'll be as academic as they would in an org. We've got our Dort guy wearing a Dort shirt. We've got our Concordia woman wearing a Concordia shirt.
I even have a Dort hat on.
Wow.
I'm doing good.
Better go find a hat, Christina. Well, it's great to see all your faces.
There's no trucker shirt that I could wear, so.
Greg Wallace, who's up next for you, has a very interesting story. He's an interesting human being. Ty Wiss may blow your mind a little bit. We may come back and Zoom, and you might have some things with that you're like, I'm not sure I agree with that, and that's okay. That's okay. There's some things I'm not sure I agree with. Yeah, he may blow your mind in a good way. And then that'll pretty much wrap up. This will be our last lesson, the final. So it's what we have left. And I will give you, by the way, I will give you time in class to work on your final. To do that, to write whatever it is you want to write. You'll be watching a video first and then writing about it. Okay?
Sounds good.
Questions? None? Okay. I really, really miss you.
We miss you too, Mrs. Keyser.
See you whenever that graduation is. Bye-bye.
Bye.